Hello everyone, this is Dan at Dan's Astrology, and I'm recording a video today where I'm looking at the transits of the planet Pluto, namely because Pluto is going to make an ingress into Aquarius soon. That would be November the 20th, and Pluto is the planet that is most commonly used in modern astrology, that has the farthest out orbit of any of the planets, meaning that a Pluto cycle, it lasts, depends actually on which sign it is, but it's going to take an awfully long time, about 20 years, I would say, in Aquarius. And there's a number of reasons. I don't know. Actually, to be quite honest, I struggle to understand why, in my efforts to make astrology videos, the videos about Pluto and Aquarius are so popular. But I will at least try to address some of my theories of why Pluto in Aquarius is such a hot topic amongst astrologers. And here we have, this is the chart for November 2020. Obviously, if we take it, this is around the time the coronavirus pandemic really kicked off. I guess if you put it all the way back to March, you can see that when COVID-19 really became and lockdowns and all that really kicked off in March 2020, there was a stellium of planets all in Capricorn, not least of which was Pluto, which was getting right in between the grand conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. And for that was one thing that a lot of astrologers, if you were to read books like Cosmos and Psyche, or if you were to listen to what astrologers were talking about leading up to 2020, a lot of them were concerned about this particular transit, where it was not just Pluto on its own, mind you, but rather Pluto being set off by these other planets in the conjunction with Saturn and Jupiter and Mars. And now I also have to, there's something about this that the conjunction you have to keep in mind is categorized as it's not really an aspect. A conjunction is, if you categorize conjunction with aspect, it would be similar to being in an opposition or a square. But the way it goes is that the conjunction is a direct contact in the sky where the planets are visibly right up, and opposition is being at an angle of 180 degrees, a square being an angle of 90 degrees in either direction, and that the conjunction is the strongest, the opposition is the second strongest, and the square is the third strongest. And then after that, you've got things like trines. After that, you've got things like sextiles. And the way I do astrology, I don't tend to consider the other inconjuncts or semi-squares or semi-sextiles or what. There's all these other silly aspects that I personally choose not to use. Don't mean to disrespect those that do, but this is how I'm doing my astrology. And so, first of all, in recent times, Pluto has been very much associated with the coronavirus pandemic and this period of time. We're trying to understand periods of time. We've entered into the post-COVID era is specifically as a different character or quality than life before COVID-19. Regardless of what your views or whatever on all this are, we can all agree that there's a distinct change in the nature of the way things have been since this has happened. Right? Now, the other thing which is interesting is that if I pull up, not Donald Trump, but I just using the internet here to make, I'll make it, I'll zoom in to make it, this is the America Sibley chart. You can see here that in the America Sibley chart, the planet Pluto is at 27 degrees of Capricorn. And that means that the Pluto return of America happened around 2022, if I recall, but I'll show you. So here we go. Here, Pluto, this is the point, 27 degrees Capricorn. And here you see Pluto was making a pass at 27 degrees Capricorn on the February 11th, 2022. This was after, obviously, the whole thing with January 6th and the controversy around the election of Joe Biden and all the Trump protesters. That happened in 2021, January 6, 2021. A year after that, in the midst of the Biden administration, you have America's Pluto return. And after that, Pluto retrogrades fairly often. So then it crossed the same point in July 2022, retrograded past it, and then came back, hit it forward in forward motion again on December 2022, around Christmas time. And then in 2023, we had Pluto making its first ingress into Aquarius. And we had our first taste of Pluto in Aquarius from around April 2023. Well, it quickly retrograded back here to June. Only a little taster, a tiny little preview in the spring months of, in the spring of last year, did we get a little taster of Pluto in Aquarius, and then it just went straight back into Capricorn. And then we had the second ingress of Pluto into Aquarius in 2024, which again, it only got to the second degree before it hit retrograde, then went back into Capricorn around September 2024. From where it has been going through this retrograde up until present day. This November 11th, this is today, right now, where we have Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn. So Pluto has already ingressed into Aquarius twice with short retrogrades that put it back into it's been basically, Pluto's been tiptoeing back and forth into Capricorn, into Aquarius for the last couple years. But since 2022, it has crossed the point where it was on the USA Sibley chart, 1776, when America was founded. So the idea is that a human being typically would look at planets like Jupiter and Saturn at certain moments in life. The Jupiter return happens every 12 years, and the Saturn return happens just short of 30 years, around 29 years. So the Pluto return is, no human being is going to live through a Pluto return because it's so long, right? But the nation state, America, has just gone through its first Pluto return. So the idea is that if you were to personify a nation the way that you would a person and look at a country's chart, then these outer planet transits become significant in reading the karma of the nation, right? And the thing is that now we're doing this, it's 2024, and we're 2 years after America's Pluto return, and now we're facing off with the prospect of the second Trump presidency. And this is just where we are right now. And one of the things which is interesting is that Pluto, talking about Pluto in terms of this context, where we're talking about the karma of whole civilizations, whole nation states, and these cycle has just completed itself, and we're heading into uncertain times, uncertain futures. That one of the things that attracts me to astrology the most is not, just like compatibility between personalities or something like that, but rather the idea that astrology is a system of foretelling the future, that we can at least, with this in mind of what things have recently happened, we can look to where we're heading in the future by looking at these outer planet transits. And I thought I'd have a go at this anyways. And so basically, and this is perhaps why Pluto and Aquarius is such a big deal for people, because for most people's lifetimes, now that we have Pluto and Aquarius, it's ingress the third time, it's not going to retrograde back into Capricorn. And because now we're at this point where November 20th, it ingresses into Aquarius, it ingresses in there for good, in the sense that it would have to take the equivalent period of time between, I'm just, like subtract 2 years, but the time from the Declaration of Independence of America to today, and considering that a whole cycle, it would take that much of a time to get to before Pluto is in that same position, like going around the clock again, right? And because of this, it's like a once in a lifetime transit. Nobody alive today is probably going to live long enough, unless there's some crazy life extending technology, to see that particular planet, that particular sign combination again. And Pluto takes a damn long time to get through each sign. So we are going to experience a Pluto in Aquarius, and I'm going to go by here month by month and just show you what this looks like. Pluto is going to go retrograde again in May of next year. And then here you can see that the Pluto retrograde stops at 1 degree. It's not going back into Capricorn. And at this point in time, if we look at some of the other outer planet transits, we notice that Gemini has just had Uranus ingress into it. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the Uranus stuff, because the point of this video is to focus on Pluto. But if you look here, Uranus has been in Taurus. Uranus takes about 7 years or so per sign. Not as long as Pluto, but still a hefty chunk of time. And Uranus has been in Taurus, what was, I don't know, 2018, 2017, something like that. And now Uranus is going to be ingressing into Gemini, which is worth noting because you've got Pluto in an air sign, Uranus in an air sign. Both of this would be called a trine. Now, if you remember what I was saying earlier, in terms of counting the strength of these transits, that the trine is a soft aspect. The hard aspects, the oppositions, the squares, are considered to be more intense than the trines. And the most intense of all are the conjunctions. So if you notice that Saturn and Neptune will be conjunct in Aries at this time, and that this is one that people are putting more attention on than some of these other transits, like the Pluto into Aquarius or Uranus into Gemini, specifically because it's a conjunction. And if you remember at the beginning of the video when I showed you what happened with COVID, there was the conjunction with Pluto, with Saturn, with Jupiter, with Mars, right? Now, this is obviously, it's a little bit different because you've also got Saturn and Neptune squaring Jupiter in Cancer. So if you think about what happened with COVID, you had Saturn and Jupiter together conjunct in a grand conjunction with Pluto, creating this idea of a new era defined by COVID. And now we have it, by using these rules of astrology, we can see that there may be something similar to expect next year with Saturn and Neptune conjunct in Aries in a square to Jupiter in Cancer, but keeping in mind, first of all, that because Jupiter's in Cancer in a square, it's not as strong as if Jupiter was conjunct. And this is the playing out of the Saturn Jupiter cycle that started, like, it would have been 12 noon or midnight or whatever with COVID. This would be the first ticking of the clock into a 90-degree angle from noon to 3 o'clock, basically, right? Or how, I don't know, maybe it would make more sense to say something different because it's not clockwise, but whatever, you get the point, right? So it's not as strong as the COVID one. And the other thing is that Jupiter is an exaltation in Cancer. And contrasted to when Jupiter was in Capricorn, Jupiter was in its fall in Capricorn. However, Saturn is in its fall in Aries. So this is kind of confusing because you have a completely different kind of dignity. You've got a weak Saturn, a strong Jupiter, and a square where, unfortunately, the Saturn is in the overcoming position, so that the weight of Saturn and Neptune, they kind of have the edge on the Jupiter, but there's something happening next year anyways. And I just have to remind you that this doesn't really have anything to do with Pluto, but there is a sextile aspect between Pluto and Aquarius and the Saturn and Neptune conjunction. And this is only with Pluto at 2 degrees. This is next year, right? So as we keep going on, we can see that Neptune and Saturn will retrograde together back into Pisces. Then they both go together back into Aries again. And by this time, Jupiter is in the middle of Cancer. I should also say that with Uranus here in Gemini, if we go back to the US Sibley chart, the America has Uranus at 8 degrees in the Sibley chart of Gemini. And you can see here that in 2026, Uranus is only going to be at 1 degree, but eventually America is due for a Uranus return as well. But I'm trying to focus more on Pluto, but I guess, I'm doing more of all the outer transits at once here. And mainly what I'm interested in is not just looking at Pluto in a vacuum, mind you, but Pluto in aspect to these other transits. And now here here's interesting, because once we have Jupiter in Leo in 2027, well, I guess Jupiter will be in Leo in 2026 as well. There will be a Jupiter opposition to Pluto, basically. Jupiter ingresses around summer 2026 into Leo and makes an opposition to Pluto. So we got a Jupiter-Pluto opposition in 2026. And like I said, this opposition is the next strongest thing to a conjunction. And I think that when you look at what happened with the World Trade Center happened not with a Jupiter opposition, but with a Saturn opposition to Pluto, right? So there are certain historical events that you can see unfolding with the oppositions, right? And also keep in mind that, I don't know, with war and all this, with Donald Trump has his Mars in Leo. And if we've got Donald Trump elected now, this will be the second year of the Donald. You've got this big Jupiter thing coming through Leo, And Donald Trump also has Pluto in Leo at 10 degrees, right? So this is interesting because eventually Pluto is going to make an opposition to Donald Trump's natal Pluto. He's going to have a Pluto opposite Pluto transit. However, I don't think that's going to be during these next 4 years. I think that will be a little bit after it. But so as I keep going here, you will see here that as we keep going, the Pluto and the trine to Uranus is the trine is we're in 2028, and the trine between Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini is a long running trine. Here in 2028, 4 years from now, we have this trine, just because these are such long transits, the trine is just still generally in place, and the sextile with Neptune is still generally in place. And here you have Saturn now separating from the conjunction with Neptune into Taurus, where it's not in a conjunction with any other outer planets. However, because Taurus is a fixed sign, we now have a square between Saturn and Pluto. So 2028 will be defined by a Saturn-Pluto square, which is going to be, again, it's similar in the combination of the like the COVID-19, but it's not going to be as intense because the square is not as strong as the opposition, is not as strong as the conjunction. It's the third strongest thing, and it's not. Here you have a Mars conjunction with Uranus in that trine, and trines. I don't know. We're having grand water trines recently. To get, and we do have a lot of floods and stuff like that happening on, which have a kind of a poetic resonance with the element of water. Whether or not I'm not saying that the aspects cause anything. But anyways, here we go. We have Pluto at 10 degrees of no, hold on, that's not Pluto. Sorry. Pluto is here. Pluto 10 degrees Aquarius. And now Donald Trump, as I was saying, has Pluto at 12 degrees, 10 degrees of Leo. So April 2029 would be when Donald Trump will be having his Pluto opposite Pluto transit. This will be 5 years from now, near the end of his term, I guess, right? Near the end of the what he's been elected for the next 4 years, there will be a Pluto opposite Pluto transit. At the same time, there will be a trine from Jupiter in Libra, a grand air trine with Jupiter in Libra, Uranus in Gemini, Pluto in Aquarius. And then this will be creating a kite aspect so we've got this kite basically. And this is 5 years from now, this kite, this thing that's opening up where you have what we call soft aspects, right? Now, this is one thing that I was basically thinking in terms of everybody is always doom and gloom, talking about like World War III and the end of the world and the apocalypse and all this kind of stuff. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing what happened with the Capricorn stellium in 2020, where you had the grand conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, together with Pluto, and also with Mars just getting in there and making it worse. And now, in comparison, in 5 years from now, instead of having a conjunction of a stellium of all the stuff, like here we have a stellium in Taurus, but this is, just the Sun, Venus, Mercury. These are the inner planets. It's not like the big outer planets being all lined up in a conjunction, right? Here you have the softest aspects are sextiles. The sextile between Neptune and Pluto, the sextile between Uranus and Neptune. The sextiles are seen as something which is cooperative and helping and of the nature of Venus. A friendly, peaceful, harmonious little sextile between each of the outer planets. And then the Jupiter is said to rule the nature of the trine. So these large trines between the air signs, a kind of a generosity, right? And now, of course, this could be, I don't know, there could be changes. I don't know. There could be sweeping changes with the revolutionary movement of Uranus, with the destructive power of Pluto, but Jupiter is getting in on this, giving it a kind of divine providence or a kind of judicial order, a kind of a it's like Zeus, right? It's a benefic. So at least there's a benefic influence on this. So you have soft aspects already of the nature of Jupiter, and Jupiter getting in on these aspects, and the sext. It's like not. I don't think this is like something to be so doomy and gloomy about 5 years from now. But the thing is, we're talking 5 years from the future, right? I mean, we're talking about periods of time that as we keep going, what's going to happen? We're just going to look at this Pluto in Aquarius right now and see how it goes. Of course, there is the Saturn square Pluto happening at this time, but I don't think that's quite as catastrophic as a Jupiter and Saturn conjunct Pluto, like what we saw with COVID. And then eventually Saturn will ingress into Gemini, share the sign with Uranus for a while. There could be a kind of a falling apart of old structures around this time, as I find there's some kind of like the revolutionary appeal of Uranus. You know, that Saturn and Uranus were conjunct around the time that the fall of the Berlin Wall happened, the fall of the Soviet Union. So these were, Neptune was also there with it though. But so we have something maybe slightly similar with the Neptune coming in with the sextile there. And Pluto making a trine to Saturn in 2031, excuse me. The sextile between Neptune and Pluto, because these things move so slow, is just going to stay there for a long time. It's going to be just part of the general. This is one of the reasons I've been thinking about making this video for a while, because there are certain things that we tend to make astrology videos when planets change and when big shifts happen, like Pluto entering Aquarius. But then now, for the next 20 years or so, there's going to be transits like this one, where Pluto is going to be in a sextile aspect to Neptune, and it's just going to be part of the background, and it's going to be part of this thing that doesn't change very much, and it's just going. And I think this is why we're interested, because more people are paying attention to this as the planets change from sign to sign, and you're probably not likely to have lots of Pluto sextile Neptune videos, because there's just like, it's just going to be like that it's just going to be part of the background, right? And then eventually we're going to have Uranus and into Cancer here. And now the time of this grand air trine will be over. And instead we're going to be having if you notice cardinal signs, you've got Uranus in a cardinal sign, Neptune in a cardinal sign, almost a square. If you were Rick Tarnas and you used 20-degree orbs, you'd be calling this a square right now. No offense, Rick, but I prefer to do it a different way. But yeah, so now when we get into the 2030s, the mid 2030s, we have a different character here with with Uranus and Cancer. But one of the things that's interesting is that we're talking about Pluto and Aquarius, Uranus and Cancer. This is what we call an inconjunct aspect, right? That they don't. There's an aversion. They don't see each other here, right? But there was something I thought was interesting reading Manilius. Manilius says that there's a secret affinity for Aquarius and Cancer, right? I don't know if that counts as a kind of an aspect, or if you get into some of these. I'm not going to get into it right now. There's certain aspects that have to do with the equinox and the whatever. That'd be too complicated. We're just gonna keep going here. I'm thinking about, well, whatever. I'm thinking about weird, quirky, niche things of astrology of Manilius. We're not going to get into it though. I'll have to think about this later. You notice Neptune is going to be in Aries for a damn long period of time, and eventually there will probably be a Uranus Neptune square. But we're focused more on Pluto here. Eventually, we're going to have Saturn in Leo in 2035, making an opposition to Pluto. And this is the same aspect that happened around the time of the World Trade Center attacks. So, this is when you're talking about things, people are all upset about wars. People are all upset about global conflict. And I think, honestly, that instead of feeling like we're in threat of rushing into war right at this moment, I think it makes more sense to look at something. If you're using astrology, and we're doing long-term forecasting here, I'm thinking that this is something based on, we can expect something along the magnitude of either COVID-19 or the World Trade Center terrorist attacks of September 11th in 2035, right? So that is 11 years from now. And if you notice at this time, Jupiter will be in Taurus, making a square squaring this opposition. So you've actually got a T-square on the fixed signs with the outer planet, with Saturn and Jupiter, which makes this more significant to me, right? Because Jupiter, if you notice when you had COVID-19, you had Jupiter and Saturn, the grand conjunction with Pluto. Now you have the three prime culprits of that alignment in a T-square with each other, which is not the same as them all being conjunct in the same sign, but it's the next. This is the next strongest thing that you could look at and say something is going to happen here, right? Mark my words, right? This is going to be something to watch for. But we've got, you don't have to act like, oh my God, the world's ending tomorrow, I've got to get my shit together. This could be something like a specific incident that happens 10 years from now that you can use astrology to predict, right? Anyways, and we're talking about Pluto and Aquarius. Pluto is only at 17. It's only about halfway through the sign right now. So we still have a long ways to go. Eventually, 2037, you're going to get Jupiter conjoining with Uranus here in Cancer. But again, that doesn't have any direct contact to Pluto. Once you get Uranus and Leo, is that going to be, we'll just have to see how it works here. You do have Neptune making an ingress into Taurus at around 2039, and at this time there's not going to be much of a square here because Taurus is at the early stages of Taurus and Pluto is now entering the later degrees of Aquarius. I'm not going to make any comments about Rictarnus and archetypal astrology right now, but they would be more lenient on how they draw their aspects. Here we have Jupiter making another opposition to Pluto. All right, so now we have Uranus and Leo, 2040, and Pluto in Aquarius, the late degrees. But the thing is, this is still, again, if you were Rictarnus, you'd be getting close to calling this an opposition. That's not how I do it. I'm thinking, I'm paying more attention to the, like, Rictarnus, the archetypal astrologers, just for context, that the archetypal, there's a certain style of astrology where you're paying attention just to the outer planets and the aspects they make, but you don't pay attention to what sign it's in. And this is just not how I'm looking at. I'm doing a video talking about Pluto and Aquarius specifically, and that with that in mind, it makes a difference what sign they're in. It makes a difference what the aspects are like. We're not going to use 20-degree orbs here, okay? But here we have an interesting one. We've got Saturn and Jupiter in Libra, where Saturn is exalted, making a trine aspect to Pluto in the late degrees of Aquarius. And at this time, Uranus will be in Leo, making a bit of a sextile, but not quite. Here we have Pluto entering the late degrees of Aquarius in 2041. And around this time, we've got Saturn in Scorpio, but again, not really close enough to make a good square. You've got Jupiter in Scorpio. Well, here's this is interesting. You got a grand conjunction, another grand conjunction in Scorpio this time. Or hold on. Well, I guess hold on. Let me just back this up a bit. No, the grand conjunction will be happening in Libra in 2041. Yeah, okay. A grand conjunction of the two outer planets in traditional astrology and Hellenistic astrology, before they knew about the outer planets, they saw Saturn and Jupiter as being the planets that had to do with civilizational changes to the system of government, to the system of kings, to the system of societal organization, and that the idea with the outer planets is that the outer planets that we have recently discovered and we use in modern astrology have a similar collective signification, which is just like that, but more so, more in the extreme of the collective. And that when you have aspects between Jupiter, Saturn, and the modern outer planets, you can expect large collective things to be taking place, as we saw with COVID-19. And so another one happening around the time of the early 2040s, with 2041, this making a sextile to the Pluto and Aquarius, and also having, I don't know, not really that much of a, if you got a 10-degree orb sextile, which we call, in our technical language, we call this weak sauce. We want to see a closer orb than that. Sorry, Rictarnus. And we want to see stronger aspects, not these little like sextile things. Now we're approaching the end here, right? The end of Pluto and Aquarius, where we will have Pluto ingressing into Pisces for the first time. Pluto ingresses into Pisces for the first time in 2043. Who knows what the hell is going to be happening at this time? Will we have flying cars? They already have the prototypes now, so that, I mean, it'll. I don't know. I'm not here to make a delineation for what Pluto in Pisces will specifically mean, in contrast to Pluto in Aquarius. But this is around the time where this window of time, which we're describing as Pluto Aquarius, will be coming to an end. So it's almost a 20-year period of time, you can see. And Pluto will retrograde back into Aquarius in the fall of 2043. And then in the winter of 2044, the New Year's time, we've got Pluto in Pisces. Then Pluto will be... No, Pluto will not be making another trip back into Aquarius. Pluto will just be in Pisces for the rest of the 2040s. So there you go. There you have it. A run through, a preview for the next 20 years of Pluto and Aquarius. Thanks for watching. I will probably do more on this later.